minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Grateful to be a part of this and to connect. Man, it's been a different season here lately, right? And we're wanting to just connect in this way as we're getting ready to walk into the summer. And our theme for Engage this summer is the idea of identity. And so I want to talk for just a couple minutes tonight about the concept of identity. And it always takes me to this one story, and it's an international story. But if there's anything we've experienced in the last several weeks, it's that we're more connected than we realize. That even when we're distanced, we're connected with the world. And globally, we've walked through this odd season together all over the world over the last several weeks. And this particular story comes from the country of Kosovo. I want to share a story of a guy named Assad. And the first time I met Assad, he just seemed like the most humble and meek man. And then he shared his story with me. And I want to start off there because, man, it just captures the idea of identity. See, Assad grew up in Kosovo back when it was called Yugoslavia. Long story. Maybe you talked about it in history class during the Serbian conflict. Yeah, anyways. So he's growing up, and he said he was really insecure because he was really scrawny. He wasn't like ripped like me, you know, like I'm really buff. You just can't tell on the camera because it's a filter. But he said he was really skinny and he was short and he felt like he was made fun of and people saw him as weak. And man, he just had a really bad view of himself. And so he went to this local gym where these dudes are there working out. And he said, hey, will y'all teach me how to get stronger? Will you teach me how to become a bodybuilder? Like I want to get strong. And he said they laughed at him and threw him out of the place. Like not threw him out as in told him to leave, like they shoved a kid out the door, threw him out on the street. Said, don't ever come back here again. And he was determined that he wasn't going to take that lying down. And so he started working out on his own. He started figuring out ways to lift weights on his own and started getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And all of a sudden, this insecure young kid, man, he got in really good shape. So he entered a weightlifting competition and he won. And then he entered another competition and he won that too. And he kept winning and kept winning. And all of a sudden this outcast, this insecure kid with a bad view of himself became the weightlifting champion of all of Yugoslavia. He literally became the strongest man in his country. Like, I can be alone in a room and not be the strongest dude in the room. Like, that's crazy to me that people would look at you and say, you're the strongest person in the country, right? That's an amazing thing. And then he entered some regional competitions. And for that whole part of the world, he was seen as the strongest man. Nuts, right? But it wasn't just they're saying, hey, you're super strong. He was winning all these awards from a small town. He was getting national recognition. And so overnight, he became the most popular guy in town. Man, you're not just the strongest dude in town. Everybody wants to hang out with you. Everybody wants to be with you. Everybody wants to be able to say they are your friend. Overnight, he goes from being an outcast to being the most popular dude in town. And because of that popularity, his little business started doing really well. Started doing really well to where he started another business. And it started doing really well. And before you know it, he went from being an outcast to being the strongest dude in town and in the whole country, the most popular dude in town, winning all these awards, and now he's one of the wealthiest dudes he knows. He bought multiple houses. He was living the life, got married to this beautiful woman. They had a couple kids. Man, he literally was living the dream. Like the things that we say would identify us, where we would want to find our identity. I'm strong or good looking, right? I'm popular and well known and I'm successful and I'm rich and I've got cool things. Everything he wanted, he had. And then the Bosnian conflict started. Again, if you haven't learned about that in history class yet, you will one day. But this conflict starts where literally his whole people are under attack and are being killed just because of the fact that they were Muslim. And his whole city is under such bad attack that he had to send his wife and his daughters and his mom to flee on foot and to go to Albania and hide out in a refugee camp. But because he had accomplished all this stuff in his life, he was very confident. His identity was rooted in all these things. And he said, I'm not leaving. I refuse to leave my house. And so he went down and he hid in this little shelter under his house. He's hiding out there for days. He hears a knock on the door and this voice says, hey, I'm a NATO soldier. I'm not here to hurt you. You're safe. You can come out now. Well, he came out. It was actually a Serbian soldier. That soldier in that moment began to beat him up and to question him. Why are you still here? And that soldier pulled out a gun, pointed it at Assad's head, and was about to pull the trigger when he put it away. And then he pulled out a knife. He told Assad, I'm not going to shoot you because you're not worthy of one of my bullets. I'm going to take your life this way instead. And just as Assad was about to lose his life, he tells the story that an explosion happened nearby that distracted all the soldiers. They took off running to see what had happened. And he got up and fled for his life. He eventually ends up in the refugee camp in Albania. And this guy who had everything now has nothing. This guy who was the most popular guy, nobody knows him and his family. They're in a tent. This guy who had all the wealth in the world had to leave it all behind. The guy who owned 5 homes is now living in a refugee camp. And this guy who was so strong found out that his strength wasn't enough to protect his family or to save his own life. But while he was in that refugee camp, he met some missionaries. And through a series of events over a long period of time, Assad became the first person from his town to give his life to Jesus. Assad became the first person to say, I believe in Jesus. And when they came back and established their life in that town and his faith began to be known, and people stopped coming to his business. His wife, who loved him and worshiped him, man, she used to burn his Bibles when she could find them. His daughters told him, we used to be proud to be your daughters, and now we're ashamed to be called your daughters. And he told this story with tears in his eyes to me and said, but I had more peace than I'd ever known. I had in that pain still more joy than I'd ever experienced because I had found out what it is to have life in Jesus. Here's the deal. If our identity is wrapped up in being popular, man, then we're going to ride a wave of joy. When we think things are going good, we'll be up, and when they're not, we're down. If it's all about wealth and money, here's the deal. A whole lot of people, maybe some of your parents you're watching tonight, maybe your parents got furloughed during this quarantine, or maybe they lost their job. And what you have found out is, man, money's kind of fragile. Success is pretty fragile. It comes and goes as the wind blows. So we got to root our identity on something more, something that can't be shaken, something that we don't have to take from somebody else, or something we don't have to manufacture from how we think about ourselves or feel about ourselves or what the mirror tells us when we look in it. Man, there's something better. There's this passage of scripture. It's not super well known, but it's on Isaiah chapter 44. Isaiah is a prophet. He's prophesying. He's declaring that there's going to come a day where a generation will come up that is experiencing the blessing of God. That there will be a generation who's experiencing the favor of God. They'll flourish. And as he describes this generation in Isaiah chapter 44 that will come up blessed by God, he describes them this way. Verse number 5 of Isaiah 44. This one will say, I'm the Lord's. This generation, from within this generation, they'll say, man, I'm not defined by what somebody else says about me. I'm not defined by whether I look successful. I'm not even defined by how I feel about myself. I'm going to say, I belong to God. He defines me. I find my identity in my relationship with him. And the verse goes on to say, another will call on the name of Jacob, and another will write on his hand the Lord's. That there will be a part of this generation who will say, hey, I'm not going to hide this. This isn't going to be in secret. I'm writing on my hand, I belong to him. That's my identity. That's who I am. And no circumstance can take that from me. No quarantine can rob me from that. No social distancing can jack that up from me. Man, I know who I am. I'm his. I belong to him, and he is mine. I am the Lord's. See, because of what Jesus Christ has done on the cross for us, we don't have to wonder who we are anymore. We don't have to live based on whether somebody thinks we're cool enough or not. What Jesus showed us on the cross is that you are worth it. He showed on the cross that you are his, and he'll do whatever it takes. As a matter of fact, he won't even spare his own son to make sure that you have access to him. That's how much he loves you. That's how much he is for you. And if we know that, it changes everything. And so from wherever you're watching from tonight, I would ask you this. Do you know for sure that you're his? Do you know for sure that you belong to him? If you're not confident of that, here's what I'm going to encourage you. Whatever platform you're watching from, would you please send a direct message to one of our engaged staffers? Say, hey, I need to have a conversation with somebody. Or maybe you just need to shoot a text to a friend that you know is really walking with Jesus. Or maybe if your parents are believers, you need to sit down with them and say, I want to know what it is to be okay with me because I know that I belong to God and that he's mine. Maybe for you, you'd say, yeah, I know that that's true, but this disconnected time I've been living through social media so much that my virtual reality is more real than my spiritual reality, and I need to be reminded tonight that who I really am is I'm the Lord's. And so at the beginning of our time together, we asked you to go grab a Sharpie. Here's the deal. I want you to take that Sharpie right now, and I want you to write on your hand, the Lord's. In just a second, Allie is going to come, and she's going to sing over us this song that says, God, I am who you say I am, right? And while she's singing that as an act of worship, I'm going to ask you to write that on your hand. And then I'm going to ask you, share it. Let us see your declaration of faith. I belong to him. I'm his. Let's celebrate that together through whatever social media platform that you're drawn to. Post that picture and then put hashtag Engage Live 2020. Hashtag Engage Live 2020. So for all the youth pastors and parents watching, put that on Facebook. For all the college students, put that on Instagram. And for all you students, put that on your Snapchat. That's super cool. We want you to do that way. Listen, if you want to do like a video of your hand and like do a little dance or whatever, you can put on TikTok. However you want to do that, we just want to see your declaration of faith, because here's what we believe. There's an identity that can't be taken from you, that circumstances can't rob from you. Maybe one of you watching will be the most popular person in your town. Maybe you'll be the richest kid in your school. Maybe you'll be the strongest dude on your football team. But here's what I know can be true for every one of us. You can say with confidence, I'm the Lord's. I belong to him and he's mine. No one and no circumstance can ever take that from you. I'm glad that you belong to him.